A high-rise sends residents and bystanders packing after it begins shaking and swaying without cause. No earthquakes or strong winds are reported in the region, but a 20-year-old research report might hold the answer. Apple plans to store its Chinese customers' data inside China and is handing over the keys to a state-owned company, but Apple claims the information will still be safe. A think tank urges the U.S. to compete with Communist China in the global tech sector before it's too late. It says Chinese telecom giant Huawei is using its cloud services to access sensitive data in third-world countries. If there's one thing Democrats and Republicans in Washington can agree on, it's condemning the Chinese Communist regime for its ongoing human rights abuses. This time, the Beijing Winter Olympics is in the spotlight. And a special delivery from China, nearly $700,000 worth of fake money found mailed into the U.S. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A skyscraper in southern China is giving locals a scare this week after it started swaying and shaking on Tuesday and continued into Wednesday. Despite its movements, there are no reports of strong winds in the area. Eyewitness video shows crowds flooding onto the streets after fleeing the building. The tremor sent both residents and bystanders running. Antennas on top of the building were spotted shaking violently as the building moved. While clips captured inside the structure show furniture and other items shaking, as if during an earthquake. Yet the city also remains free of seismic activity. It is unclear what's caused the 73-story building's tremors. The tower stands nearly 1,200 feet tall and is 20 years old. Local construction standards allow for a certain level of horizontal movement in skyscrapers, but this case appears well beyond normal limits. Chinese experts discovered the building wasn't actually swinging left and right, but instead jumping up and down. Some have suggested possible reasons for the movement, like subways traveling underground beneath the building or sudden temperature increases in recent days, but many aren't convinced. As experts are left grappling for an answer, a 20-year-old master's thesis from one Chinese university has resurfaced. It analyzes the building's construction. The research paper points out that construction work had already started on the building before its design blueprints were fully complete. Problems resulting from the poor pre-planning started showing later, like excessive vibration of the roof antennas. But the issue wasn't found until after the roof had already been sealed, so the antennas were sawn off and later patched. Apple is storing its customers' data in China and is giving the keys to that data to a Chinese company. NTD's Patrick Hayden breaks it down.
Apple, the self-styled privacy advocate, has been giving in to the demands of the Chinese regime. The New York Times published an expose about it Monday. The report says Apple is preparing to store its Chinese customer data at a center run by a Chinese state-owned company. Last year, Apple transferred legal ownership of its Chinese user data to Guizhou Cloud Big Data. The report says the Chinese regime forced Apple to abandon the encryption technology it uses everywhere else and store the digital keys that unlock the information in the same center. With the keys in China too, it likely means the Chinese Communist Party will be able to access the data, a regime that excessively monitors and persecutes dissidents and defenders of human rights. Apple claims it doesn't compromise user security in China or anywhere else. The report also found the iPhone maker is aggressively censoring apps to avoid upsetting Chinese regulators. Apple is expected to start storing its Chinese data in the new data centers in June. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
Beijing is known to work with a number of developing countries, providing technology and cloud services for many of them. But one think tank is urging the U.S. to compete with Communist China in that international tech sector before it's too late. This week, Washington-based research agency CSIS published a report on Chinese tech company Huawei's strategy. The report explains many third-world countries are welcoming Huawei cloud technology into their government operations. That's as more developed countries reject the Chinese giant from their 5G networks. Most of these still developing nations are located in Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East. Huawei is subject to less scrutiny there, and these economies have fewer barriers to entry. By using Huawei's cloud computing services, these nations are giving the company access to sensitive data, including information on citizens' health, taxes, and legal records. Cloud computing is a modern way of accessing computer software and hardware. It means that instead of having all that information stored on a desktop or local network, a separate company delivers them straight to users over the internet. That way, businesses only need to pay for what they need and when they need it. For many companies, the strategy can provide a more cost-effective option. But there is a major drawback. These services might allow Huawei to collect the intelligence it processes and use it to benefit the Chinese Communist Party. Washington has repeatedly accused the Chinese tech giant of spying for Beijing. It claims the company exploits backdoors it creates in its telecom equipment. Documents say Huawei has already made dozens of deals with over 40 foreign governments or state-owned companies. But those figures may only be the tip of the iceberg. That's because other international agreements have likely been formed quietly, without public announcement. The CSIS suggests that third world countries will soon start playing a much larger role in global networks. Because of that, it is urging the U.S. to take action. The U.S. is able to compete with Huawei's cloud services, thanks to its cutting-edge technology. But to win the competition, America will need to make its products more available to the infrastructure in developing countries. It is rare to find Republicans and Democrats agreeing on much in D.C. nowadays. But there is one thing bringing both parties together, condemning the CCP for its ongoing human rights abuses. NTD's Steve Lance has more from the Capitol.
Republicans and Democrats are in lockstep calling out human rights abuses and genocide in China. They held a bipartisan hearing to examine the implication of holding the Winter Olympics in the communist country. They called on the International Olympic Committee to reassess its relationship with Beijing.
Xi Jinping and the CCP are persecuting believers and all manifestations of faith and spirituality, including Christians, Tibetan Buddhists, and Falun Gong practitioners, in ways not seen since the Cultural Revolution.
Democrats and Republicans alike said we can no longer turn a blind eye to Beijing's disgraceful human rights record in the face of profits.
I've said if we don't speak out against human rights violations in China for commercial reasons, we lose all moral authority to speak out for human rights anywhere.
The International Olympic Committee is no stranger when it comes to dealing with Beijing. In 2008, in spite of widespread calls to boycott the Beijing Olympic Games, they carried on business as usual.
The International Olympic Committee's shameful choice to hold the 2022 Winter Olympics in Beijing and other cities in China sadly makes the Olympics an immediate focal point for our consideration. How did it come to this moment where an event designed to uplift the human spirit is being held in a nation that is crushing the human spirit?
Human rights activist Young Jin Lee says the international community is at risk of becoming a tool in the CCP's soft power strategy.
I'm calling on the U.S. and its allies to do the following: initiate a joint political boycott of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, urging businesses and athletes not to participate in the Games.
Democrat Congressman from Massachusetts, James McGovern, thinks this is a necessary approach.
An announcement to postpone the 2020 Tokyo Games was made only 4 months before it was scheduled to start. If we can postpone an Olympics by a year for a pandemic, we can surely postpone an Olympics for a year for a genocide.
Voices around the world are calling to boycott the 2022 Beijing Winter Games. But is the International Olympic Committee listening? In the wake of the CCP virus pandemic, many eyes are certainly watching how they respond. Steve Lance, NTD News, Washington, D.C.
Beijing is accusing the U.S. of threatening peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. It comes after the U.S. Navy sent a warship to sail through the Taiwan Strait on Tuesday. The move is part of a once-a-month routine transit. The Navy said it was in accordance with international law. The strait separates Taiwan from mainland China. In response to China's accusation, the U.S. Navy stated the ship's transit through the Taiwan Strait demonstrates the U.S.'s commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. The United States military will continue to fly, sail, and operate anywhere international law allows. Taiwan's defense ministry explained that the American vessel that had sailed through the strait headed south, adding that the situation was as normal. Military tensions between Taiwan and Beijing have spiked over the past year as the Chinese regime continues to ramp up its aggression. Beijing-based military jets also frequently enter the island's air defense zone. Taiwan is an independent state. The democratic island has its own elected leaders, constitution, and military. Communist China has never ruled Taiwan, but it claims the island as its own territory and has strongly hinted at possible attempts to take over Taiwan by force in the future. Hong Kong suspended operations at its representative office in Taiwan on Tuesday. Hong Kong authorities didn't explain why they halted operations at the Hong Kong Economic, Trade and Cultural Office. But they said it has nothing to do with the recent rise in virus cases in Taiwan. Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council is expressing deep regret for the decision. Hong Kong opened the trade office in Taiwan back in 2011. Its top purpose was to promote economic cooperation and cultural exchanges between Hong Kong and Taiwan. The city has long served as an important trade and investment conduit between Taiwan and China. Tensions have been rising between Hong Kong's Beijing-backed government and Taiwan. It came after Beijing implemented the national security law on the city. Taiwan has previously criticized the security law, and it has opened an office in Taipei to help people who may want to leave Hong Kong. Coming up, nearly $700,000 worth of counterfeit bills are entering the U.S. They all come from China. More on that after the break. Nearly $700,000 worth of fake money has entered the U.S., and all of the fake bills came from China. Customs and Border Protection explained that several shipments were stopped by agents in Chicago, containing $685,000 in counterfeit currency from China. The shipments arrived at Chicago's International Mail Facility. The fake money came in the form of $5, $10, $20, $50, and $100 bills. Though the bust is hardly an isolated incident. On April 23rd, CBP officers in the city said they seized more than 280 shipments filled with counterfeit bills and coins at the same facility. 95% of these deliveries came from China. China remains the top source for fake goods entering the U.S. market. In a statement, the Assistant Area Port Director for Chicago pointed out that counterfeiting is often used to finance illegal activities like human trafficking, drug smuggling, and terrorism. President Biden visited a Ford plant on Tuesday, making his case for a $170 billion electric vehicle plan. He says the U.S. is falling behind China in terms of selling electric vehicles, and he wants that to change. NTD's Christina Kim brings us more.
President Biden pitched his $174 billion electric vehicle plan in Michigan Tuesday.
The future of the auto industry is electric. There's no turning back.
At the Ford electric vehicle plant in Dearborn, Michigan, Biden called for the United States to lead the world in electric vehicle manufacturing, infrastructure, deployment, and innovation.
How the future is going to be made, but it's going to be made here in America. Made in America.
Biden made the case for government grants, tax credits, and consumer incentives to lower electric vehicle manufacturing costs and support market demand. He proposed point-of-sale incentives to encourage Americans to buy electric cars, although the incentives will not apply to expensive luxury models. Biden is also seeking to put more charging stations around the country. The goal is to build a national network of 500,000 of them by 2030. There are now around 100,000 in the United States. His plan also calls for low-cost loans to companies that produce clean energy vehicles in the United States. Biden faces resistance from many congressional Republicans on his electric vehicle focus. Christina Kim, NTD News.
Students at a Chinese-owned private elementary school in Canada won't be able to learn about the Chinese Communist Party, the Tiananmen Square massacre, the Dalai Lama, and other topics Beijing considers sensitive. The school is set to open soon. NTD's Don Ma has more.
In Richmond, British Columbia, Canada, a Chinese-owned private elementary school will be opening in September, and concerns are rising over whether children will receive an honest education on issues related to China. Local media reported that teachers there were instructed to avoid talking about subjects related to the Chinese Communist Party, the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre, and the Dalai Lama. If children start a conversation regarding these topics, teachers have to find a way to change the subject. The school in question is called Chaoying International School. It's headquartered in China's Shandong province. The Canadian branch will be its first school overseas. According to local media outlet Richmond News, the head of the school will instruct teachers to tread lightly around the aforementioned subjects. The school is not branded as Beijing's Confucius Institutes, but being headquartered in China, it may be under the jurisdiction of China's Ministry of Education, just like Confucius Institutes. A now deleted page from the school's website revealed something else in common with Confucius Institutes. The website said that it mainly carries out projects such as Chinese and Western culture exchange programs. Confucius Institutes also self-proclaim to be cultural exchange centers. But in reality, a Chinese regime agency directly funds the institutes, and instructors there have to avoid topics Beijing considers sensitive. It's not clear if the Chaoyin School in Canada frowns upon talking about other sensitive topics, for example, the abuse of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. It's also unclear if their soft stance towards the CCP has any relation with their Chinese ownership. The head of the school did not respond to NTD's request for comment before airtime. NTD asked some local Chinese parents on how they feel about sending their children to such a school.
If you ask me, as long as kids get the proper education they need to, then there is no problem.
But another parent is not okay with the school potentially avoiding those topics.
It's not like that if the school doesn't talk about these topics, kids will never find out about them. It's going to mess with kids' minds in the future. You have to be honest when it comes to kids' education. You have to talk about these issues.
The British Columbia Ministry of Education granted a certificate to the Chaoying International School, allowing it to operate. The new school is now accepting applications for the upcoming school year. Annual tuition fees are the equivalent of roughly $12,000 to $19,000 US. Don Ma, NTD News.
The CCP is rolling out a new law targeting private schools in China, and this is having a bad impact on some school stocks. The new law says that Communist Party members within each private school must be able to make important decisions and supervise the school. Last Friday, Beijing stressed this point again. Later that day, the shares of multiple private schools fell sharply.
Many people believe that private schools already reached a dead end, so they sold stocks of those schools very quickly. Otherwise, it will be too late. Those sales caused the shares to plummet.
Some Chinese private schools are listed on Hong Kong stock exchanges. Among them, language school New Oriental's shares fell over 10%, sinking to a historic low. Vocational school Chuanglian Education shares plummeted 20%. Online school Coolearn Technology shares dropped as well. The Chinese regime's official website wrote private schools should uphold the leadership of the Communist Party of China. The new law will ban foreign curricula in schools belonging to China's compulsory education system from kindergarten to grade 9. It also bars foreign entities from controlling schools that are part of the compulsory education system. Members of the board of directors or any other decision makers at these schools must be Chinese nationals. The regime is able to penalize any individual or school breaking under this law. On Sunday, U.S. bank Citi said to its clients that the new law is stricter than expected. Citi expects much of these schools' revenues and profits to come under challenge. The new rules will take effect on September 1st, when the fall semester begins. In the latest blow to digital currencies such as Bitcoin, Beijing is banning financial institutions and payment companies from providing services related to cryptocurrency transactions. Conway G. Gittins reports.
Bitcoin's volatile week continued on Wednesday. It tumbled below the $40,000 mark to hit a 3.5-month low before recovering some ground. The drop came after China said on Tuesday that it's banning financial institutions and payment companies from providing services related to cryptocurrency transactions. As the biggest and best-known virtual money, Bitcoin had already been under pressure from a series of tweets from Tesla boss Elon Musk. But the news from China sent it as low as $38,514, a 9% fall. That took the coin down around 40% from a record high hit last month. It is also heading for its first monthly decline since November 2018. Rival cryptocurrencies Ether and Dogecoin also fell Wednesday. The crypto declines were sparked last week by Musk's reversal on Tesla accepting Bitcoin as payment. His subsequent tweets caused further confusion over whether the carmaker had shed its holdings of the coin. Analysts at JP Morgan said that investors may be shifting from Bitcoin back to gold in what they called the steepest liquidation in Bitcoin futures since last October.
An official in Germany is rejecting the Chinese regime's so-called vaccine diplomacy. German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said on Saturday that the Chinese Communist Party's, or CCP's, policy was doing more harm than good for countries in need amid the pandemic. Maas wrote, "Vaccine diplomacy is more geared towards the interests of countries that provide vaccines, rather than those that urgently depend on vaccines." He pointed out that some countries are using vaccines as a tactic to increase their geopolitical influence, specifically calling out Russia and China. He added that only by providing vaccines on a global scale can the world defeat the pandemic. His comments also fall in line with his earlier criticisms towards China. During the G7 foreign ministers meeting earlier this month, Maas urged all countries to follow a human rights-focused China policy, saying that while nations must pay attention to economic interests, they also have to be conscious of human rights and freedom. Maas pointed out that autocratic countries and authoritarian regimes constantly try to challenge freedom and democracy with their own political models. And because of that, the G7 structure should establish values and strategies to address these violations. China has been carrying out its vaccine diplomacy policy for months, seemingly to expand its influence around the world. As of early April, Beijing had provided CCP virus vaccine doses to more than 80 countries. According to British analytics company Airfinity, China had exported 115 million doses as of the end of the month. CCP leader Xi Jinping is vowing to fight climate change, but it seems like Americans don't trust his word. A new poll found that only 15% of Americans trust Beijing on this issue. Meanwhile, 57% said they don't trust Beijing, and 28% were unsure. British data analytics firm YouGov conducted the poll and released the results last week. They surveyed about 1,500 Americans. The poll came out a few weeks after reports had found that China's greenhouse gas emissions in 2019 surpassed that of all the developed world combined. A few weeks ago, the Chinese regime pledged to peak China's carbon emissions by 2030 and become carbon neutral by 2060. But it seems U.S. climate envoy John Kerry also has doubts on Beijing's promise. Last Wednesday, he told the U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee that it is not a matter of taking things by trust. It would be stupid and malpractice if we just set up a sort of trust thing. And that's all for today's China in Focus. But before you go, China in Focus is partnering with the Epoch Times newspaper on their new subscription-based streaming platform, Epoch TV. That's where you can watch our exclusive special reports like this one every Friday night. In them, we'll explore questions like how China lures in foreign companies to steal their technology, how the Chinese regime is actively collecting health data on people around the world, how the ancient Chinese philosophy of good governance differs from the current-day communist regime, and much more. Be sure to check out these investigative episodes by clicking on the link in the description down below. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you really want to understand what's happening with China. You can still watch our Monday to Thursday episodes for free on YouTube, NTD Cable TV, the NTD website, and the Epoch TV website. In our next special report, we will discuss China's ambition to dominate the global monetary system. China is speeding up its plans for digital currency.
The digital renminbi is being tested in many regions in China.
Building a cross-border payment system to push the use of the Chinese yuan for global trade.
也可以说它是一个大国重器哈，所有的这些基础设施、通路、安全、数据全部掌握在我们自己手里头。
All part of a bigger plan to challenge the U.S. dollar.
It's all about harvesting part of the dollar hegemony. We can't overthrow the dollar hegemony all at once, but there's every chance.
And eventually push the Chinese yuan to dominate the global monetary system.
I mean, if you think that the United States has a lot of power through our Treasury sanctions authorities, you ain't seen nothing yet compared to people who have to transact in digital serialized currency that can be tracked its entire history up to where it is at the moment. That currency can be turned off like a light switch.
But what will it mean for the world when transaction data ends up in the hands of an authoritarian regime known for its surveillance state and strict control over its people? In this special report, we explore how far the Chinese regime has gotten toward forcing its yuan onto the global stage and what risks its success could have for the world economy. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow.